Good morning, students. This is Arindam Bag here. Our topic is ghosts, and today I will be dealing with the last part, that is Act 1, Act 3. I will describe the things, or I will give you the summary of Act 3 over here. So, let us move to our slide and see what happens. So, basically, in the earlier act, we have seen the orphanage faced an accident and it has been burned down. So, what happens after that? So, Act 3 will deal with this part. That what happens after that accident, what is happening. So, it is dark except for a faint glow of fire from outside. Regina and Pastor Manders are exchanging empty remarks about the tragedy. Here, tragedy means the fire in the orphanage. At that time, Engstrand enters. And much to the pastor's dismay, he relentlessly teases the pastor. Why he was teasing? Because he understood, or he knew that pastor was behind the action of pastor, was actually responsible about the fire at the orphanage, and insinuating that the fire was started by the prayer candles and is therefore the pastor's fault. So now we know how the fire was there, who was responsible. He speculates on the public scandal that the fire will cause. He was afraid of that, the people, when they will be aware of this situation, that it was Pastor Manders who was responsible for this fire, there will be kind of scandal. At that time, Mrs. Alving enters and asks the pastor to take all the paperwork with him. She doesn't want to think about the orphanage again. She lost her hope. She invested a lot of money to build it up, but unfortunately, it is destroyed by the fire. The pastor speculates that he can devote the money to some charitable cause, and Engstrand reminds him of his home for sailors. So Engstrand was looking for this opportunity. Now, for the orphanage is destroyed, Engstrand is after his own project. But the pastor replies that he is worried about public opinion and it will unseat him before he can make any such donation. So now the situation is like this. So due to the fire at the orphanage, people were furious. They were unhappy how this tragedy broke out. They were looking for an answer. Engstrand knew the answer. Mrs. Alving doesn't. And at that time, if pastor is investing money to another project, which is kind of demoralizing for the society, public will be very much unhappy with him. So Engstrand hints that if the pastor says nothing, we will not have to worry about public opinion. Basically, he requested to keep his mouth shut. Engstrand even implicitly compares himself to Jesus, who once took the blame for someone else. This is something new. If we compare him with Jesus Christ, on this point, once took the blame for someone else, in personal life also, Engstrand accepted Regina as his daughter. This is the second time it's going on. So, ironically, he considered himself once took the blame for someone else, and he considered himself to be, compares himself to Jesus Christ. The pastor promises to devote the money to Engstrand establishment, and Engstrand decides to call it Captain Alving's Home. Captain Alving's Home. So that is also, the name is also, ironical. Why it is like that? We know the life of Captain Alving. At the beginning of the act, the baseness of Engstrand's character is emphasized. Not only does he practically blackmail the pastor, he is pretentious enough to compare himself to Jesus Christ. Most surprisingly, the pastor lightly accepts this entire campaign because he don't have any other option also. He may have no choice but to accept it, and yet he sees it as a favor of Engstrand part for his sake. Next is when the pastor decided not to buy insurance for the orphan asylum, he was acting under the obsessive concern for public reputation. Now, because of this same concern for public opinion, he has lost what little money he could have salvaged from the uninsured disaster. He gives in to instant deceitful persuasions and agrees to finance a saloon with the leftover money. In this last appearance of the pastor, we see his gullibility and his concern for public opinion united, which looms over all thoughts of Pastor Sohn. He is no dependent on others that he must believe everything they see and think. So he holds a position in the society. His words has a very severe effect on the society, and his actions are also. So basically he need to be careful with every footstep. So that's why he is concerned about. Now the last part, Captain Alvin Sohn, as we find in the part 1 of Act 3. The irony is in the name. It is fairly obvious. It will be a house of debauchery. As the real captain was a man of debauchery, but the pastor will fund it because he thinks it will be a house of public service. He deep inside he was also aware about this, but he did not contradict Engstrand for his own interest. So apparently the establishment looks like a decent one, but it is just something else. Just as the memorial was set up to honor the captain's reputation, Engstrand's establishment will be truly fitting memorial to Captain Alvin. So this is the summary of part 1. We are moving to the summary of part 2, Act 3, part 2. So what happens here? The pastor leaves, and meanwhile Oswald has entered, and he predicts instant establishment will burn, just like all that remains of his father. He gathers his mother and Regina close to him, telling that he needs a helping hand. Why he need a helping hand? He was suffering from pain, or he was afraid that there will be a huge amount of pain and he needs a fatal dose of morphine. So that's why he asked for. His mother says that she will now remove the basis of Oswald's reproach. She begins to tell how Oswald's father was full of the joy of life. Joy of the life means he was totally immoral in his life, and he did all the things which we can consider immoral. She says he was full of untamed energy for which neither the small town nor she could provide an outlet, for he had to take up with drunkards and become a broken man. So she accepts, Mrs. Alving accepts that Mr. Alving was a man full of energy. What do you say? Hyperactive. And it was impossible for her to tame that energy. Even the small town was unable to provide the necessary ventilation for that. She also admits that Regina belongs in the house. Regina guesses her meaning immediately and asks to leave. She is bitter that Mrs. Alving hired her as a maid when she should have raised her as a gentleman's daughter. She was shocked to know this. She is matured enough to understand what the statement means. But she was expecting that if I am a member of this family, why I was hired as a maid. She goes to catch the pastor and demand her inheritance from the money that would have gone to the orphanage and will now fund the saloon. So she exists. Next is Oswald is mildly shocked but reminds his mother that he didn't know his father and indeed is just as troubled as before. When his mother tells him that every child should love his father, he asks how she can believe in such superstition. Mrs. Alving realizes that she is just propagating another ghost. She asks whether he loves her. He says at least he knows her and that he is very thankful for all her help. Oswald admits that she has relieved him of his self reproach, but he says nothing can alleviate his dread. She reassures him that soon the sun will come up. He sits her down, telling her that his dread results from the lapses he suffers, the fits of gloom that lurks in his mind and come upon him suddenly, rendering him helpless as a child. His mother tries to reassure him, saying that as his mother, she is there to care for a child. But this is just what Oswald doesn't want. He severs the doctor's description of his illness as a softening of the brain, finding the image charming like red velvet curtains, supple when stroked. Mrs. Alving is horrified. Mrs. Alving is horrified. Oswald blames her again for scaring away Regina. Sorry, the slide was not changed. Okay, now it has been changed. So Mrs. Alving is horrified. Oswald blames her again for scaring away Regina, who could have helped him. He says that the doctor predicted his next attack will be his last. And he shows his mother 12 morphine capsules, a lethal dose. He wants his mother to administer them when his attack comes. He knows that Regina would have done so had he asked her. Mrs. Alving finally promises to do so if necessary. He says that soon the sun will come, she will see the torment he suffers. She tells him that he was only been suffering from delusions and that now that he is home with his mother, they will go away. The sun rises over the glistering mountains and she goes to turn out the light. Oswald says, "Mother, give me the sun." His muscles loosen and he slips in the chair. His mother panics and searches for the pills, screaming all the while. So that's the end of part 2 and the end of the drama also. Now we are in the commentary section. So Mrs. Alving finally tells the truth, if only partially. When she paid such close attention to Oswald's talk of the joy of life, it was because he was finding an excuse for her husband's behavior. By explaining his sins, by saying that he had too vibrant a spirit and no outlets for it, she is not only providing an excuse for the husband who made her miserable, she is shifting the blame to herself. She says that it was her boring sense of duty that stifled him, when in fact it was a sense of duty that made her stay with him and was driven her to preserve his reputation even as she does with his speech. Regina's reactions are not unpredictable. We are not surprised that she so unhesitatingly chooses to leave Oswald. Throughout the play, she seems less interested in Oswald himself than in climbing the social ladder. Thus, she speaks in bits of French. Thus, she is just as interested in charming the pastor or as Engstrand. Her actions also provide a new insight, however, as they also serve to expose and protest against Mrs. Alving's failure to think of Regina as a human. Instead, she wants to think of a child as a child to be cared for and controlled. Mrs. Alving's treatment of Oswald in this scene is similarly unrealistic. She continually tries to talk him out of his troubles. She will not accept that he is actually terribly ill. She mothers him even and especially when he expresses disgust at being reduced by the illness to a childish level of helplessness. She also insists on the ideas of filial piety, of a son leaving his father, and of the nuclear family in general, that the pastor has used on her throughout the play. When Oswald is able to call them superstitions, ghosts, she begins to recognize the horrible irony of her behavior. If Mrs. Alving is inconsistent, so is Oswald. He reassures her about also, threatens to leave and blames her for driving Regina away. In the end, he is right to doubt her. When he finally relapses, she is terrified. And the play ends before we learn whether she will give him the morphine or simply go mad herself. The sunrise is a final symbol of a light. It clears away the gloom. All the facts are on the table, yet the result is not enlightenment but madness. Neither dark nor light is perfect. The dismal aspects of Norwegian society will persist. Oswald, who has always known the joy of living, now also knows the truth about the pain of living. Under the weight of this combined truth, he goes crazy. The main theme of Ghosts is the extent to which society invades personal life. Mrs. Alving, obsessed with keeping up appearances, tries to protect her late husband's reputation, but because of this concern, she not only ends up living a lie and building a memorial to her husband's false reputation, but she also ruins the lives of her husband's two children, Oswald and Regina. Pastor Manders is also ruled by neurotic concern for public opinion. It leads him too much foolishness to the extent that he is eventually tricked into funding Extrem's cellar saloon. In the pastor, we see the connection between public opinion and duty. When the pastor tells Mrs. Alving that she must save Oswald from sin, it is unclear whether he is motivated by a pure sense of moral duty or by a deference to public opinion. Because for him they are essentially the same. It is because of the pastor's principle that he doesn't give into the mutual attraction that he and Mrs. Alving share, and that would have made them both happy. Finally, Mrs. Alving's speech on ghosts in the second act establishes the play's key metaphor. The ghosts of duty and public opinion come to dominate and ruin generation of lives. Mrs. Alving feels that all people are haunted not only by their inheritances from specific people but by general superstitions and exist within a community. The idea of filial piety or duty to family members above all else is such a ghost. So that will be all for today. I hope you understood the topic. Thank you for watching my channel. Please like, share and subscribe my channel. Thank you again.